Hello, and welcome to Global Journalist. I'm Byron Scott, your host for this week's discussion of world news events by professionals whose job it is to report the facts and analyze the consequences. In recent weeks, while world focus has been on Cairo, part of the story has been the threats and beatings suffered by journalists trying to cover that story. Late last week, an Egyptian journalist shot by an unknown sniper died. Earlier this week, a British journalist was denied re-entry to Russia because of stories he'd written based on the WikiLeaks dispatches about Vladimir Putin. And yet, more often, attacks on the press are legal, especially when governments are involved. And that's why European Union officials are at odds with the Prime Minister of Hungary, Viktor Orban, who incongruously is also the current president of the EU's own council. Here to provide insights on this story and an arguable trend towards national laws that obstruct press freedom are from Brussels, Valentina Popp, reporter for the EU Observer. Valentina, welcome back to the show.
Hello, nice to be back.
Stephen Ellis, press freedom advisor for Europe and the Americas at the International Press Institute, or IPI, in Vienna. Welcome, Stephen.
Hi, Byron. Thanks for having me on.
Okay. Also in Vienna, Gerfried Sperl, columnist and longtime editor for Der Standard. Gerfried, we're happy to have you on the show.
Hello.
Yes. And Attila Mang, host of Hungarian Public Radio's 180 Minutes, coming to us from Budapest.
Hi.
Thank you for being with us, Attila.
Hi.
Let's start with Valentina. And to give us a précis of this contretemps with between the Hungarian Prime Minister, who is also the President of the EU Council, and the EU about media laws. Valentina?
Yes, hi. So the EU presidency had a rocky start this year, but that's something that happened before, perhaps not on the particular issue of the media law. But so in terms of what happened with Hungary, on the 1st of January, when they took over the so-called rotating presidency of the EU, so what they are doing, they're chairing all the ministers' meetings and organizing ministers' meetings as well in Hungary. They had passed a law which imposes more restrictions on the media, and especially this new media council tasked with analyzing the content and the behavior of media outlets, and also tasked with giving out fines that could potentially ruin one of those outlets. So the passing of the law probably people have speculated why the Hungarian government had chosen to do it on exactly to coincide with the rotating presidency. Some said that perhaps people won't pay attention and people won't be as critical about a country that is just chairing the EU. But it actually backfired completely, and it totally undermined the beginning and then the authority of the country to deal with other dossiers and issues on EU level, because a lot of NGOs and public figures in Europe, like Václav Havel in Czech Republic, have spoken publicly against this law and warned about the limitations to journalistic freedom and freedom of expression that this law brings about. So the European Commission and the fight, but it's not actually a fight, but the reaction of the European Commission to this law was to ask for more information and also to make recommendations on how they should change it so that it complies with EU standards and principles. So they have issued a couple of recommendations, and it seems now that the minister in Hungary is considering that. Meanwhile, just today, I've read a dispatch that the leading newspaper, Népszabadság, has also filed its own constitutional challenge against the law, precisely because of the functions of this media council.
Let me interrupt here, and
this is where we are. Yeah.
yes, and let me thank you, Valentin. Let me ask Attila Mang to give us the perspective from Budapest. Is this really really an attack on the media, or just Hungary's particular take on press law?
No, there is no such thing as Hungarian particular take. What I would like to add to what we've been hearing from Valentina is that the Hungarian government started its work last May, so it's a new government, and with a two-thirds majority, so a very strong legitimacy from Hungarians. And we had a media law which regulated the market, which dates from 1996, so quite old. This regulates the electronic media. And we have an even older legislation from 1986 regulating the press. In 1986 in Hungary, it was still dictatorship. I mean, it was the Kádár regime, so
right.
Before the changes in 1990.
This is before the fall of the Berlin Wall.
Yeah, so there was a kind of legitimate will and legitimate intention from the Hungarian government to change the media legislation. Also because we joined the EU, and there are a lot of EU directives which the Hungarian legislation had to install, had to integrate. So this is the government's point. Probably they didn't think of the consequences and the European public attention to what happens.
If I can just interrupt, there's on our video there is our viewers are seeing activists demonstrating in both Vienna and in Hungary about this law with tape over their mouths.
Yes,
a very traditional symbol.
Yes, because I think there are a lot of problems with this legislation. First of all, that the general approach of the law is that the media is something to curb, and the media and the press is something to regulate, and something to kind of push back and try to curb its possibilities. So this is the general approach of the law, and there are of course specific problems as well, which are, I think, dangerous for press freedom. I consider this law as a show of force from the political power. They simply want to, the political power, I think everywhere in the world wants to somehow try to influence the press, and so this is the general approach of this law. And there are, of course, very specific problems that I don't see the reason why this legislation has to regulate the whole media landscape, from certain blogs to print outlets. I see the reason why the government or the state has to regulate, for example, electronic media, where there is a scarcity of frequencies, but really I don't see any reason why the legislation has to be so severe and so strict in what happens in.
Let me ask Stephen Ellis to give us the perspective from the International Press Institute, which is in itself a press freedom advocate in Vienna. Stephen?
Thanks, Byron. Well, we are strongly opposed to this law, and we have grave concerns about what it will do to the media landscape in Hungary. As the previous guest indicated, it was first proposed before the Hungarian parliament and was partially passed last June, I believe, and then there was some outcry about the third of three bills implementing it. So that was pushed back until last November, until just before they assumed the presidency this January. We're deeply concerned that it regulates so wide-reaching across the entire market, and that it places so much power in the hands of such a small body, the Media Council, which is, in our view, effectively controlled by whichever majority party controls Parliament. In this case, it's Prime Minister Orban's party, which currently has a two-thirds majority. We're also very concerned that the calls in the law for balance in reporting are unclear, and we understand that the chief of telecoms for the European Union, has similar concerns. Last month, she indicated that the EU might have problems with the law insofar as it seeks to regulate media that originate from outside of Hungary rather than just Hungarian media, and also a problem with the balance issue.
Here in the United States, we've been debating the nature of balance and objectivity for generations, and we haven't been able to solve that term. Gerhard Spiel, as a longtime editor and IPI activist, is this a matter of old habits dying hard, or is this actually a part of a trend?
It is part of a trend since 9/11, actually, 2001. We had it also in Austria. Remember that several countries tried to strengthen press curbing and to change media legislation. So we had the possibility at the beginning of this century to not only demonstrate against what happened in Austria, but also to be successful in not giving any chance to such efforts of new legislation. Even Jörg Haider, the one-time hero of right-wing radicals, did not dare in Austria, together with the conservative government, to change media laws, basically, But in Central Europe, you have to see that we have a twofold heritage. On the one hand, to the east, the communist heritage, and to the west, the fascist heritage, and to the south, we include Italy. You'll never forget in the face of or confronted with the Hungarian example how the situation is in Italy. So that's why we in Vienna so much opposed against this new law in Hungary. 10 dailies in Austria placed advertisements criticizing the situation in Hungary, and immediately agreed to this initiative of the Press Institute. So we have to oppose because Hungary has the presidency of the EU, and we have to secure the function of the control of controlling the powers by free media. And as a second point, of course, we have to ensure that this tendency does not have any possibility to be used by politicians in Austria, in Germany, in other countries, to be in line with Viktor Orban.
Let me come back to that in a moment. But before we continue this discussion, I want to remind our listeners that you can view or listen to this program by downloading our podcast at globaljournalist.org. That includes the discussion and features that continue after our half-hour show. This week's Global Journalist Extended, for example, features an in-depth interview with two award-winning American correspondents from the New York Times and the Global Post, now covering the demonstrations in Cairo. You also can send us questions or comments, care of Global Journalist Program at gmail.com, or look us up on Facebook. And speaking of Facebook, a couple of our correspondents this week commenting on this law seem to suggest that individual nations should have